Hi, I'm Dr. Duke, and this is I'm Right. Today, I am joined with Hal Shurtleff, the director of Camp Constitution, a wonderful summer camp for kids who want a constitutional experience of the highest magnitude. Hal, thanks for joining us again today.
Well, thanks for having me on again. It's always a delight. And by the way, it's not just for children, but it's for people of all ages, Camp Constitution.
There you go. Full disclosure, I'll be joining Hal at Camp Constitution this summer for the first time ever. I'd promised him I'd do that, and I'm glad to be able to go out there and do it. I'm looking forward to it very much. Hal, but we have you on today to talk about Agenda 21. Agenda 21 is such an important issue, and so many people don't even really quite know what it is. Many people have heard the phrase. Give us a definition of Agenda 21 for dummies.
Well, Agenda 21 has been rebranded. Now it's called Agenda 2030 or Sustainable Development. But actually, it goes back to a meeting that happened in Rio de Janeiro in 1992 about leaders from about, 160 plus nations got together, and they came out with this 40-chapter document, about 600 or 700 pages, called Agenda 21. And what made it worse, it was what you call soft law. It wasn't a treaty. Now, a treaty, if something between nations, it has to go to the Senate. It has to be debated upon. So Daddy Bush was there, George H.W. Bush, brought it home, and he said, okay, great. He didn't get reelected, so it was up to Bill Clinton. And Bill Clinton established the White House Office on Sustainability, hired the American Planning Association to say, look, we need to be able to implement this document here in the United States. So they came up with something called Towards a Sustainable America or Sustainable America. And you can find that on, you can go do a search on your computer and get a free download. And I want to show this particular book. This is sort of like a Agenda 21. This was put out by the people promoting Agenda 21. And it was interesting that the man who edited it, David Sitarz, he said that Agenda 21, its full implementation will affect every single living person on the planet. The Agenda 21 apologist will say that it was just a meeting. It didn't have any teeth to it, that it really doesn't mean anything. And if you're concerned about these things, it's a conspiracy theory. That's what they always say, conspiracy theory, when they don't want to handle the issue. So Bill Clinton establishes sustainable development concept, and it called for 8 things. And one of the pillars of this is, of course, population control. And population resettlement, as well as the idea of global warming. Now, that term has been rebranded. Now it's climate change. So, and when it first came out, I know there was a few organizations like the John Birch Society, people like Dr. Michael Kaufman, who simply passed away recently, people like Tom DeWeese of American Policy Center were sort of, talking about this thing and there's nothing to worry about. That's another part of the planet. But it was a lot to worry about. 2 years prior to this meeting, there was an organization founded at the UN called the ICLEI, International Council for Local and Environmental Initiative. ICLEI sounds like a bad Japanese horror movie, and it's worse. ICLEI was just founded to be able to implement Agenda 21 at the local level. So then it took a while for it to be noticed, like a lot of things. You don't always see the impact. But so a lot of towns in cities in the United States are members of ICLEI. They pay dues to this government-to-government organization, which I say is unconstitutional. Article 1, Section 10 says that states can confederate, and this is not a private entity. This is a government-to-government entity founded at the UN, but it's not an arm of the UN in the strict sense. It's more like a subcontracted UN. But their goal is to implement Agenda 21 throughout the whole world, town by town. It was interesting, too. Your town or city may belong to ICLEI, and you don't even know what it is, and you go to your selectmen or go to your city councilors, and they'll say, what in the world are you talking about? Because they have very little say in it. Now, I live in the city of Boston, and thankfully, Boston got out of it about 4 or 5 years ago. But even if it gets out of it, there's other entities, sort of like a local entity, like in Massachusetts, we have what they call green communities, which is implementing Agenda 21 at the state level. So I always challenge people, go to your town's website or go to your town hall, for example. And I've traveled throughout the region. I've given presentations on this from Fort Kent, Maine, all the way to Grand Rapids, Michigan. And when I have time, I'll go into a town or a city, the city hall, the town hall, with my little camera, looking for evidence of Agenda 21. In some cases, it's right at you. I mean, it's just so obvious. For example, in certain towns in Massachusetts, when they became green community members, the green communities would give them a check. So basically, you're being bribed with the taxpayers' money. You join this, and we're going to be able to give you a nice bunch of money. And they have these giant, oversized checks, that these towns and cities. And I'll go in there and take pictures of these checks or do little videos. And within a short time, the things started to disappear. These checks started to disappear.
Hal, let me, so you've given us a lot to chew on in a short period of time. Let me just step back again, and I'm coming at this from the perspective that many people in our audience are going to be just trying to wrap their mind around this. And a couple of things, and you tell me if I'm wrong, initially what we know. We know that this is shadowy, right? This is shadow government. We know that this is something that's being done below the level of official government so as to make it more useful and get it in quicker without having to consult people. You did a good job explaining that. I love the idea that you've talked about how this is really a global war, that all sorts of things like climate change and population control are part of this. In a sentence or two, though, tell us, if you had to say what the primary objective of these social engineers, these globalists are, because that's the other thing we want to talk about. This is global, like you said. Their plans, and they're not affecting these plans through the ballot box. They're not letting people vote on them. They are not letting legislative bodies discuss them and decide whether or not countries want them or not. These are being quietly implemented on a global level. These are globalists. It's going to affect every creature, every living human being on this planet. In a sentence or two, in a short little, pithy little bullet point sort of way, to the average person listening, what is it that they want? What is it that they want control, but how is that going to manifest itself?
They want to abolish private property, and they want to abolish the free market system. That's in a nutshell. And also the concept of sovereign. Sovereign nations will no longer exist under this. So, in fact, when I do a stand-up presentation, and I think it's the second plank of the Communist Manifesto that calls for the abolition of private property, I said that, in a nutshell, is Agenda 21.
So it is yet another backdoor way to sneak socialism, communism, Marxism on a global level, right? That's what's kind of happening. Would you?
Right. At a local level. And it's interesting. Sometimes our detractors will say, "Oh, you think we're getting directions from the UN?" You don't need directions from the UN. The UN is a problem in itself, but you have plenty of people, right? You got a lot of homegrown globalists who do believe that we shouldn't have borders, who do believe that we should become part of some kind of global government. The term New World Order was used quite a lot. In fact, it was Daddy Bush who first used that term publicly. Not the first time to use it, but he was at a joint session of Congress, and he called for a new world order, and the UN is envisioned by its founders. So he said, "Wait, but this is getting people nervous, so we better change that term." So they use the word global governance and such. So it seems not as ominous as New World Order.
For those of us who are concerned about local communities, like you said, Hal, it's good that you pointed that out, that this is really infiltrating local communities over and above what states and even the federal government might itself be doing. For people who are listening there, I would give you an example, right? Think about what's going on with land use in this country. Think about how the Bureau of Land Management has overstepped its bounds, going after people like the Bundys. Think about how under President Obama, more and more private land, more and more state-owned land was swallowed up by the federal government in the name of national park system. This is part of it too, right? That what they want to do is crowd people into cities and off of the land itself.
If you go to the ICLEI website, ICLEI, they'll tell you that by 2050, 2/3 of the world's population will be living in cities. Well, who says that? Why are they so sure that's going to happen? I'll give you an example. You mentioned the Bundys in Nevada. Northern Maine, Aroostook County. That county is, and just a little south of Aroostook County, there was this woman who owns Burt's Bees. She ended up giving, this is when Obama was president, she bought a huge tract of land, of woods, and she gave it to the federal government, and now it's a national monument. It's a total violation of the Antiquities Act, which I think was passed in 1906. If George Washington slept there, or something significant happened, then that might be some area that you want to preserve and sort of a buffer zone around it, but not hundreds of thousands of acres of woods. I was up there in August giving presentations, and this little town of Millinocket. It was a paper mill town. It was formed over about 120 years ago. Both the mills have closed up. You go into town and half the businesses are gone, but there's one brand new storefront. It's the National Park Service. And they're telling people, well, gee, we're losing business and industry. Let's have a federal park. So they want to turn all that area into a big park, get it off the books, off limits, and so forth. And that's what we see in other parts of the country do. That's sort of a microcosm. Then you look at the inner city. How is it being in the inner city? You might be driving around, you haven't been on maybe a certain neighborhood in a couple of months, and you notice all of a sudden there's these funny-looking bike paths that never were there before, little bikes stenciled on busy roads. All of a sudden, they've actually shut down a lane, and you have a bike path. And in some streets, they'll put these bike paths, and then the bike paths disappear at the traffic light where the Mack truck shows up, It's craziness. That's called complete streets. And if you did a search for that, complete streets, you'll see. And they're doing this all over the country. Now, inner city or rural areas. I'll give an example of an inner city. There's a neighborhood in Dorchester, Massachusetts. My friend of mine has a church there. And across the street was a lot. It was a 3-family home and a storefront, which was torn down about 25 years ago. It was a crack house and so forth. And the mayor at the time said, look, you guys can use it for your church parking lot. And they put a fence around it, didn't even pave it. That was used. It was worthless. Today it's worth $10 million. And they want to come in and they want to sell it, and they want to put what we call stack 'em and pack 'em housing, these small condo units, retail units on the bottom. And who is coming in? It's going to be the more affluent people from the suburbs coming in because they want to get people as tightly packed as they can. And you'll see a lot of cities, you'll see areas where there used to be a little brownstone. They tore the brownstone down, and now there's a 20-story condo. And it's usually close to the commuter rails, too.
Hal, we've got a couple minutes left. I want to get a couple more questions into you. This is really very useful for us to get a sense of what's going on. Now, tell me this: who's paying for this? Where are they getting their funds? If this is all shadowy and many governments are denying complicity, this is all going on at levels below them. Who's funding all of this? Where's the money coming from? And how do we, as American citizens, recognize these entities in our own communities?
Well, it's coming from HUD, Housing Urban Development. It's coming from EPA. HUD is one of the biggest ones that is implementing this. And there seems to be unlimited amounts of money. A couple of years ago, we were in a recession, but these towns in Massachusetts were signing up and getting these big checks. And the more towns, the more money. So some of it's coming from the taxpayer at the state level. Some of it's coming from the federal level. So that's where it's coming from.
Do you see any diminution of this, any recognition from the Trump administration that this is a problem? I know that Donald Trump did give back some of the lands that the federal government had seized under Obama back to the states. Do you have any hope that a Trump administration is even aware of the problem?
I think he's aware of it to some extent. I haven't seen a whole lot of rollback, but we know things take a little time. We're hoping that these monuments in Maine and in Nevada and Utah also will be reversed. But a lot of this is being implemented. You see, we talk about the deep state. They look at, hey, a president's there for 4 years, but these folks are there. Doesn't matter who's president. And a lot of the stuff, if it's local or at a regional level or a state level, it'd be implemented no matter what Trump does. So we have to fight it at the local level. And we've seen a lot of success all over the country, from little rural towns to cities where people have been informed about this. And there's a great little story in the town of Ringe, New Hampshire, where I went in there with some information about the issue. And within a few weeks, I found out that they had a charrette, which is another way. It's a visionary session. They even changed that term a little bit. And so this local statewide group comes into the town, and they want to say, here are the plans. We're going to redesign things. We're going to create smart growth areas. So I got wind of this, and I wrote a letter to the local newspaper. Some people in town got wind of it, and they held a meeting. And to make a long story short, within about a year, all of the Agenda 21 proposals were completely defeated at the ballot box.
Fantastic. We've got about 1 minute left, and I want to give you the last word. Quickly, one or two things that every American citizen can do to be aware and to help fight this.
Well, find out what's happening in your town. Go to your town's website, a city's website. Look for these kinds of terms. Look for sustainable development, climate change, climate action committees. And there's a couple of sources. One of them, American Policy Center, which I recommend, Tom DeWeese, who's a good friend of ours. Also, go to Camp Constitution's YouTube channel. There's some great videos on that subject. Contact me, and I can put you in touch with people in your area that will help fight this.
Great,
So
excellent.
campconstitution.net is our website.
CampConstitution.net to find out about the camp, but also to get some really good information on Agenda 21. For those of you who are just learning about this now, it's not too late. This is deeper than you know. It's been going on longer than you know. It's much scarier than even you know. So get in touch with somebody. Check out what's going on in your local communities. Ask some questions. Among other people, Hal Shurtleff is a great resource. And once again, give people the way they can reach you, Hal.
CampConstitution.net would be the best way to do it. You can reach me on Facebook. Go to our Camp Constitution Facebook page as well. Those are probably the best ways to get a hold of us.
Hal Shurtleff, thank you so much for being here. I'm sure we'll have you on again to talk a little bit deeper about this issue.
We shall. Thank you.
Thank you.